Okay, sounds good. Okay, so with the go ahead, I am Kylie Hand. I'm working for the Brain Injury Association of North Bay and area, and today I will be introducing our guest speaker and our program today. So, welcome to Bayamba Aware and our Education and Prevention of Financial Abuse in Vulnerable Populations series. We offer a number of different educational opportunities. Some of our past presentations and presentations to come will include topics such as our common scams, budgeting and financial literacy, wills and power of attorney, empowerment and education, consumer awareness, and brain injury information and support on it as a general opportunity of information that we provide. So just a bit of housekeeping for everybody. With our Zoom platform, we will be recording this event. So if you could please keep yourself muted just to reduce background noise. Feel free at any time to type in questions in the comment box. And John, our host today, has also suggested that if people have a question, if you're familiar with using the reactions button on Zoom, you can also raise your hand, and maybe we'll try and offer an opportunity in the middle for people to unmute themselves and ask questions as we go, just making sure people have an opportunity. And if not, we can also receive questions after the fact if you're watching this in a recording, and we can do our best to provide the information or forward it on to John, who may have connections who can answer questions that come up. So please feel free to reach out to us, and you can reach us at bianbaaware@gmail.com. That's bianbaaware @gmail.com. So thank you very much for joining us, and let's introduce our speaker. So today our content will be around mass marketing fraud, and we're very lucky today to have Special Constable John Schultz, who is the Community Safety Coordinator for the North Bay Police Service. And in regards to mass marketing fraud, we're hoping to learn from him just what's out there, what's happening in the world of mass marketing fraud, how do the police handle it, and hopefully some more information about fraud prevention in this specific context. So welcome, John.
Thank you very much. Hope everybody's well today, as well as they can be in this crazy pandemic world that we currently live in. So I'm going to talk to you probably for the next half hour to an hour, and we're going to discuss mass marketing fraud. I do have a bit of a handle on it because I did do almost 31 years in the OPP, and my last 10 years were in the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre as the OPP intelligence analyst there. I tell you that because it makes me familiar with the subject, but if you think you're an expert in mass marketing fraud, the scammers are very smart. They twist things. Anything you see in the news, they're sitting back in their kitchen having a coffee saying, how can I steal somebody's money by twisting this message? So it's a continuous push for police to try and educate everybody out there that's listening today, because these scams twist all the time. We want to educate you, and then we want to assign you a task, because when we educate you and tell you about something, we're hoping that you're going to reach out to your family members and your friends and say, hey, some cop guy was telling me about this kind of prevention idea, and it's something that you should really know about, because it's through education that's the best method for us, because then there's no victimization. So we have to continuously talk about it. So we're going to talk about what is mass marketing fraud. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview on the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, just because they're near and dear to my heart. I spent a decade there. Then we're going to talk about how police deal with fraud, what current mass marketing fraud trends are on the go, and things just continue to rejig themselves along in our world too. And I'll segue right off the bat by talking about, I was talking to one of our members at North Bay Police yesterday, and his mother got a call from somebody who said that they were her grandson, and that he was involved in an accident and needed money, and that he was driving. The only thing the scammer didn't know is that the grandson was actually 14 years old, so she tweaked to it right away. But the grandparent scam is alive and well. It continues to hit Canadians and people right across the planet, really, because mass marketing fraud has no home. It hits everybody. And then we'll talk about what should you do if you are a victim, and how we want people to come forward and report to us, because that's how we know what's going on. And then some prevention tips. Hopefully we can get some prevention tips out there. But the number one thing, if you take away anything, and I'll mention this after, is the whole pretense of take 5 and tell 2. So whenever somebody contacts you, whether it's an email or by phone, those are the main 2 areas where scammers live and contact you. Take 5 minutes and say, does this make sense that this person's calling to ask for my credit card information? Does it make sense that they're asking for my social insurance number? Why are they pressuring me to answer? So take 5 minutes and think about it before you give out any personal information or any financial documents, and then tell 2. So after you're done, make sure you tell at least 2 people. This is the call I got today. The social insurance number scam. They called me. Somebody called me and said that they were collecting for taxes and they needed my number. Make sure you tell those 2 people, because it's through prevention. Again, that's the big lesson. Take 5 and tell 2. If we can get everybody to do that, there's going to be a lot less fraud going on in our world. And what is mass marketing fraud? Well, it's just fraud. Theft by deprivation, theft by lying, basically, is what it is. It's mainly organized crime that's doing it. There are some one-off people out there, but it is being run by organized crime. They have different levels of it. They have people who specialize in collecting funds. So what do you need to run a mass marketing fraud? You need communication with people. So is it done by, even some is still done by mail, such as a lottery scam. So I'll talk about that later, but there's still fraud being conducted through the mail, by telephone, by email, by text message now. With everybody getting a cell phone these days, the scammers are moving on and texting people. So they need a method to communicate with you, and then they need a method to collect your money. A lot of times they're going to ask for methods that you don't normally see. And we don't endorse certain things, but say Bitcoin, for instance, these virtual currencies, the scammers like those. It is a legitimate company. Online vendors, some of them now use it. But really, there is no government agency that uses Bitcoin. So if you're ever getting a call from somebody who says they're involved in a government agency and they're asking you for Bitcoin payment, right away you know it's a scam. So again, they need that communication method, and they need a method of collecting your money. Everything else, they can just make up a story. They use false names, they use false companies. So a long time ago in 1993, Northern Ontario was getting hit with a lot of the old traditional call centers where you saw the phones in the rooms. It's a different setup now because of computers. But a lot of Northern Ontario was getting hit by scammers and mass marketing fraud, and it was being done a lot out of Montreal. So the Ontario Provincial Police had an office here in North Bay, and they started taking calls because they were looking at fraud. So the thing about a scammer is it's easier to take $1 million or $1 from 1 million people than it is to take $1 million from one person. So that's what they're doing, is they're reaching out and they're trying to get $2,000 from you and $1,000 from you and $500 from you. But at the end of the day, if they can scam a bunch of people, it's a lot of money. So what they identified way back, an officer by the name of Barry Elliott, who worked for the OPP anti-rackets branch, said we need to try and find more victims. So they started a small call center here in North Bay, and that eventually evolved into what we now call the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. It grew from 93 to 1997. In 1997, they realized we have an issue, especially with seniors. They're at home. They may have more funds available to them because they've retired and they've saved for that retirement. And they started a program called the Senior Buster Program, which is now the Senior Support Team. And what these people do is they reach out to seniors, and they're available to talk to seniors so that they can prevent you from becoming a victim. Because part of the issue is once you've fallen victim, the scammers log that information. They're very organized, and you also become subject to being victimized again and again and again. They'll continue to contact you with different types of scams to try. It's all about trying to get your money. So they recognize that. They started this senior support program, and it's a real kudos. So our national fraud center is right here in North Bay, Ontario. It's located downtown. It's now run by the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but the OPP is still in it, and so is the Competition Bureau of Canada. So it's those three different entities that are working together to try and prevent fraud right across Canada, and they share that information with law enforcement in different countries around the world as well. It became recognized as the National Call Center in 2001, and so much information was pouring in that by 2002, they started an intelligence unit to take a look at all the data that was going into the computer and try and help police. So at the fraud center, they don't actually investigate. They collect all the data, and they help police by letting us know what's going on in our communities. They also share victim information with us, which is very important. But they also share information with the media so that the media can put it out to you people to say, look out, the grandparent scam's hitting this area, or it's tax season. Be very careful because the scammers are going to be running tax scams as well. By 2012, it had become a national program. So the OPP they up to that point had been managing it. So by 2012, because it became a national call center, they backed off and let the RCMP take over management, but they still have a big part of it because Ontario is our largest province that has the most population. Scams are very sophisticated today, or they can be. There's scams that are geared towards businesses, and these scammers, they profile us as a society. So they actually have scams for lawyers. They have scams for doctors' offices. They have scams for our youth. One of the things is the low rental scam or false rental scam. And you may have heard this before, but that's geared towards our students that are going away to school because they go online and they steal pictures, and then they say that this place is for sale in Ottawa, or not for sale, for rent, I mean. So, and they ask for first month's rent. So somebody wires them the money, and then they lose their money because it's not actually a real place. They borrowed pictures of some other place that's for rent. So they're very, very good at what they do. And currently the fraud center is looking at roughly, it goes up and down, but roughly 30 different scams. That's the number that's hitting people out there. They adopt to technology. Some people will say, well, why is it when I look at my call display, I see 0000 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Why is it coming up like that? Well, with the increases in technology, they also use the computer voice over the internet protocol to make calls. So it makes it extremely hard for policing services to identify where it's coming from, and it also disguises it so that it makes it look like it's coming from a fictitious number. Some people have even reported they've been called by their own phone number, and that would be an occasion where they're using a specific type of program that dials back. Law enforcement, when we look at things, we have to look at things both from the city of North Bay when we get a complaint, but who else is getting it? Because if a scammer is hitting somebody in North Bay, they may be hitting somebody in Thunder Bay, Toronto, Winnipeg, but they also cross borders. They have no borders, we do. So the scammers will quite often try and flip money from country to country, and it makes it difficult for us. So we've had to open our lines of communication in order to communicate with our friends south of the border in the United States, or perhaps it's England or Spain or Australia. So it's increased our need to share information on a policing level as well. We have seen a continuous buildup of victimization in Canada, but keep in mind, a lot of people are reluctant to come forward and reluctant to report fraud, and they think to themselves, oh, how could I have done that? That wasn't very smart of me. And they're embarrassed. But we need to know that information, because that's how we identify what's hot, what's happening, and that helps us do some prevention work as well. So the fraud center does all that intake, and they do the reports for police, but they also do prevention and education, and they also do disruption too, because they're working with some of the companies, because legitimate cell phone companies, they don't want their good name used in scams. So they'll work with us sometimes in trying to disrupt, or if we can prove to them that a prepaid cell phone that's in the name of Batman, and that has happened, it's actually a scammer's phone, and we'll try and shut that down. So if we look at pre-pandemic, so in 1919, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre received over 56,000 complaints from across Canada. 22,248 victims out of that, and they're reporting a monetary loss of $131,394,000. So, $100 million, but keep in mind that's only probably 5%. I myself have and I'm not proud of this, but I've had to interview people who've lost $1 million, and it's terrible. It's terrible for these people. But that person, they did have a lot of money. It's just as bad for somebody who's not as big on the financial scale. If you're just getting by, $1,000 may be a ton of money to you too. So, and the scammers, they don't care. They really don't care what your stature is in life. They just want your money. And the fraud center is averaging still, they're getting 7,000 emails a week. So it is busy. It is lucrative. And it did not slow down in the pandemic, because we've seen all kinds of scams, including here in North Bay, where we've had reports of people, they're selling vaccine shots now, which doesn't exist because the government supplies it for us. And they're charging for it, but we're getting it through our tax dollars for free. So you really have to watch what's going on in the news, because as I said at the beginning, the scammers will twist it. As far as intelligence, trying to keep up, we work with the fraud center, policing services across Ontario. There's 51 police services across Ontario that help feed the information into the fraud center, and we also get information back to them. And we're sharing ideas on new technologies such as Bitcoin or the texting of scams, or new payment methods. And as a new scam comes out, we're able to push out some ideas to people on preventing them. One of the biggest scams still going is the romance scam. It's become a little more lucrative now because people are trapped at home, such as today. We're doing a Zoom meeting. Zoom meetings are now happening daily, because we're protecting ourselves, we're isolating ourselves. But romance scams, they'll go on and put up a profile, and at one point, and I'm going back into the past, but actually William Shatner was the most viewed picture for romance scams. So they would go on and take people's pictures, but William Shatner's used probably 200 different names where he's been on dating sites. I don't think Mr. Shatner knows that, but but they'll use other people's pictures and say, I'm and the story there is a buildup of trust. And some of these scammers will talk, a month, 6 weeks, but then it's always going to lead to a monetary grab, because I've got a son that had to go to the hospital. I can't afford to pay for it. I lost my job. I just need money to get me over. I'm involved in an inheritance, and I can't leave the country to come and be with you, because if I leave the country, I give up my inheritance, and I'm fighting with my brother over this inheritance that's usually worth a large sum of money, 6 figures anyway. But I need your help. So if you could just send me a couple $1,000. So the romance scam for me is one of the worst, because it breaks you down mentally and financially, because you're talking to a person. Sometimes they'll even Skype with the person. and you're building up that trust, and you think you've met somebody that looks really, really good as far as a relationship's concerned. And the next thing you know, you've had your heart broken, and you've also had your wallet broken, because ultimately they're just after your funds. So, you know, if you've never met a person in person, and they're asking you for money, that should be a big red flag, right? Because especially if they're in another country. The CRA scam, that's another big thing that continues to go. The Canada Revenue Agency, a lot of those are by telephone. Who's received those calls? I do all the time. Even I tell a story about one of my youngest kids who she got her first cell phone at the age of 13. And she calls me upset one day and says, "Dad, they're coming to arrest me." I said, "Who?" She said, "The Canada Revenue Agency. I haven't paid my taxes." I'm like, "Honey, you don't even have a job. You can't pay your taxes," right? So, but they scare people, right? And they're very good at that. So we have to recognize that, you know, the Canadian or the Canada Revenue Agency, they're not going to call you and threaten to arrest you for non-payment of taxes right out before they've even notified you. And they're not going to call you on the telephone and make that threat either. And they don't do threats. So antivirus scams, I see them on my computer all the time, the pop-up windows, but we've also had where they call you and say, "Hey, I'm from Microsoft. There's an issue with your computer. We think there's a virus on it. Can you just allow me access to your computer?" Big red flag. Do not let anybody have access to your computer. You can always shut that down. And it's always good if you're getting a call, always keep in the back of your mind, take that 5 minutes to think about it. Does this make sense? But if you do have an account with an antivirus company, there's nothing wrong with saying, "You know what, I'm going to call you back." Hang up the phone. You call them on the number that you have for them, not the number they provide you, because scammers are very good at providing you with a phone number for whatever company it is, but it's their prepaid cell phone number. So you look up the number, make sure you're the one that's in control of the conversation. Email hacks are a big thing. We really have to watch out for. If somebody sends you an email and you don't know who the person is and they're asking you to click on a link, that's a big red flag. Number one, who's emailing you when you don't even know them? And number two, don't click on a link if you don't know what is contained in the email, because you could be allowing somebody access into your computer. Computers are a fantastic thing. You know, we have a world of information available to us just on the click of a button, whether you're using Google or Firefox or whatever search engine you have. But keep in mind, you feel really comfortable. You're sitting in your own home. You're sitting in your comfy sweatpants or whatever, and you're having yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. So you really feel comfortable, but by logging onto the internet, you've also allowed anybody in the world basically access into your home, because with all the different means that they can come through via social media, emails, Skype, all these different, you're allowing access to people in. So you really have to be guarded as to who you're speaking to and on what terms. Counterfeit goods, that's another area. The fraud center actually still looks at that. We don't get a lot of calls, but I'll warn you right now, and it's the saying's been around for forever. You get what you pay for. There's a lot of cheap stuff that's available online, and I will say it does come from China. You know, we've had instances where it's been reported to Canadian law enforcement where people have put on shoes and they go to tie the laces on their new running shoes, and they literally fall apart right out of the box because they're made in knockoff plants, and scammers are doing that. Another big one that and I mentioned earlier that still uses the mail, our regular Canada Post mail, is the prize scam. They're stealing checks. They're washing the checks, which just means they blank out certain areas, and then they'll put in a figure. Generally speaking, it's about a $50,000 figure, and they're using names like Walmart, Canadian Tire, the Bay, all the big box stores that you see, and they're saying, "Congratulations, you've won a lottery." Attached is a check for $4,000, and I'm guesstimating it may be $3,500, it may be $5,000, but Most of them are about $4,000. So you've won $50,000. Somebody entered your name at our store, and so congratulations, we've enclosed this check for $4,000 to help you pay the administration fees and taxes that are required by law for this $50,000 winnings. So all you have to do is cash this $4,000 check and wire $3,000 back to us, and then we'll send you the $46,000 that are outstanding. This is being done to help you, so you don't have to come up with any funding. However, and it makes it feel a little bit more legitimate, because the amount that they're asking for is always less than the total amount of the check. So if it's a $4,000 check, you're being asked to send $3,000. So it sounds legitimate. Hey, I got $1,000 in my pocket. However, that's a counterfeit check. And with our banking system, you're responsible for everything you deposit. So once that check's been identified as counterfeit, now you have to repay the outstanding amount. So you may still have the $1,000, but you got to replace the $3,000, right? So you know, when they're sending these out, and we know this because we do catch some of the bad guys, and bad guys, there's bad girls too. That's just a non-generic term. But you know, when we catch these bad guys, they're telling us that they're sending these out 5,000 at a time, 5,000 envelopes at a time. So if you get 4 or 5 people out of that 5,000, it's been a good day, because they're all wiring you back, say $3,000. So you know, it is big money. So beware. How do you win a lottery you never entered? And if they're sending you checks, big concern. And I've heard people say, oh, well, you know, you put a hold on the check for 6 days. I've heard 6 days, I've heard 2 weeks, but sometimes it's taken months to identify the counterfeit check, and you're still ultimately responsible. You will have to pay the money back. I'm just flipping through here so I can keep on course. You know, we also look at credit cards. Credit cards are still the safest way to shop online. What we recommend is, if you have credit cards and you're doing a lot of online shopping, keep one credit card just for your online accounts. It's probably best if you maybe make it, I don't know how much you spend, you have to look at it yourself, but maybe put a $500 or $1,000 limit on it. Then you keep your other credit cards stashed away at home for your big purchases. But this way, if your credit card ever gets compromised online, it's only going to be that credit card that gets compromised. Credit cards are still safe, whether it be Visa or MasterCard, because if you do get scammed, you have to monitor your bill. Every month when you get your bill, make sure you go through it. But as long as you identify it, it may take 2 months for the credit card company to reimburse your funding. But if you can prove that it's fraud, there's a clause in there with your credit card that they're going to reimburse you that money. So that's a really good thing. So that is a safe way to shop, and that's the way I do it. I may not be up on all scams, but you have to remember, you got to make yourself less of a target, and that's a way of making yourself less of a target. So how do police deal with fraud? So frauds are a very long investigation, and I'll tell you why, because it's very paper cumbersome. We have to do search warrants or production orders, which are court documents. So if you report to us that you've wired money to somebody in Spain, we also have to reach out through the RCMP, because they're our national police force. We have to try and look at the other end over in Spain where the money was wired, but we may also have to do if there's a phone number involved. So now we have to do a search warrant or production order on that phone. So we have to lay out everything. We have to type it all out, take it to a justice, have the justice say, okay, yes, it is a crime has happened here, and we're authorizing this company to provide all their records to the police. It takes time to do that. And these judicial authorizations, or whether it be a search warrant, you hear it on television all the time, and especially on the police TV series, they seem to be able to do it in about an hour and a half. It's our experience that it takes a lot longer than that. It could, depending on how complex the investigation is, it can take a week to write a good production order, because we have to make sure that if we're doing it and we ultimately catch the bad guy, we have to go to court and we have to prove that that document is proper, because that's one of the things they're going to look at is, did the police have the grounds to get it? So these investigations take a while. We also look for help. So if you're using some, say Western Union, if you have Western Union money, and you've been caught in a scam, there'll be an MTCN number or a number associated to the money that you've transferred, and that you generally get a receipt when you go into Western Union for that. If you call these companies and let them know, I've been victimized, but I want to share that information with the North Bay Police, they will then share that information with us, and that makes our life a lot easier. You really don't have to be that worried about it, but that's just something that's, I'm letting you know that the police have negotiated with these companies, and these companies that do wire transfers, they don't want to be known as scammers either. They are legitimate companies. So, they're looking at ways that they can work with us too, because ultimately they don't want you to lose your money either, because they don't want a bad reputation, and they're good people too that are working there. There are investigative bodies across Canada because fraud is so lucrative. For instance, there's the Toronto Strategic Fraud Partnership, which is run by the Toronto Police Service, but the OPP is in it, the RCMP is in it. There's government, Ontario government investigators that are in it. And they also meet every third month with investigative colleagues, so to speak, from the United States. So United States Postal Service, as well as FBI and some other federal partners down there. So they're sharing information because, and you've heard me say this earlier, is the cross-border thing. But by making these contacts, we're able to share information on a very quick time frame. And that's the kind of things that we have to do as police, because, to write a paper and have it processed down in the United States, it takes way too long, and the scammers have already collected the money or they've moved it on to another location. So we have to be able to cut down on the time frame. But there are these investigative bodies that police are feeding into. We call them joint forces operations. And the reason it's a joint forces operation is because money is tight everywhere. We hear about the high costs of policing. So if every police service is able to feed just a little bit into it, then we can create a body of investigators without it being a big burden on one thing or on one organization. As well, police are getting into the prevention end of things as well, such as what we're doing here today. This is great. We always enjoy the opportunity to tell people, we got to stop, to take 5 and tell 2, right? We have to continuously get that message out. And social media has also created some new avenues for policing as well. So North Bay Police has a Twitter account. So does the, we're starting up Facebook, I believe, this month. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, they have a website, they have a Twitter account, they have a Facebook account. These are the kinds of places you want to go. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Center website, they have all your up-to-date scams. So you can go on there and see what's hitting you. If you download any website, if you're going to go to any website, I always recommend the CAFC. They're partial to my heart because I work there, but they're providing that up-to-date information that everybody needs to know about. And don't forget, when you go on there and you see that there's a new scam, your mission is to tell 2 people about it, because it's that education component that we have to continually get out there. And we try, here at North Bay Police, if we have somebody come in and tell us about a scam, we try and tweet it out, or we also work with our friends in the media. So you may see it in the Nugget, you may see it in Bay Today, because, we're trying to push that information out there. And we do, we generally lose a minimum of $500,000 a year out of our community to victims of mass marketing fraud. It happens too much, but we have to, there's that continuous messaging. So what happens if you are a victim of fraud? The first thing is people are going to feel embarrassed probably. And we get that, right? But we really need people to share that information to us. And we will investigate it. Even if it came from, West African organized crime, which is, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, all those little countries, they're notorious for doing fraud. They have a lot of gangsters over there that like to defraud people. We still have contacts there. We've had fraud conferences right here in North Bay where we had 2 investigators from Nigeria that came over and worked with us. Great contacts. Again, that cuts down on the time frame required for law enforcement to talk to people and get victims interviewed and get suspect information out there. But if you are a victim, we really need all of your documentation. So if somebody's called you on the phone, document phone numbers. We need copies of the email, receipts of any money. If you've been given a bank account number, if you've been given on Bitcoin information, all this information we have to have, because we have to, the story may be fictitious, but we have to be able to look at how they contacted you and how you lost your money. How did that money disappear? When you report it to police, we're going to need all that. That's what the investigator is going to take from you, and they're also going to do an interview with you. Then we also have to work with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. So for instance, you lost $3,000 on a scam. Maybe it's that lottery scam. You cashed the check. You wired off $3,000. Now we have to look at that, but we're also going to reach out to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre and say, hey guys, this is the investigation we're after. This is the type of scam. These are the names the people used. And they may be able to correlate it with other investigations where we can maybe jump on board with Winnipeg Police and Calgary Police, who are also looking at somebody running the same thing. And we may be able to zero in on who's doing it. We can also do that whole prevention piece to say, and we don't run victims' names in the media, but we can say, unless people are willing to, but we can say, hey, here's a gentleman that fell victim to a fraud, and this is the way the fraud works. So it's that prevention piece. And I saw that you did. There was a question there about cashing a fraudulent check. We have to look at everything, because there are people who do cash fraudulent checks and they're doing it maliciously for their own gain. However, if you're receiving a counterfeit check as part of a scam, when we look at that, our officers are trained enough to know that, you're not going to be charged in an instance like that. But we have to investigate everything. So it is time. As I say, people do fraudulent checking, and they do get charged for it. However, if you've got your bait letter, they call them bait letters. That's what the scammers call them. If you've got your bait letter that says, here's a check for $4,000, then we also get the check back, and we're able to identify whether it was a wash check and how it became fraudulent. So you aren't going to be charged in an instance like that. I hope that answers the question. What else do we need? We need to know the financial institutions. The other thing is, how did you find out? How did you become victimized? It could be through Facebook. It could be through eBay. It could be through Kijiji. It could be through a dating website. All these companies, they work with law enforcement to take down the fraudulent scammers baiting area. So if it's a scammer that's posing as somebody looking for love on a romance scam, they pull down those profiles. If it's somebody using Kijiji to sell false things like scams that have gone around, and it's not so much in the pandemic, because nobody's going to hockey games or ball games or football games, but there's been people that have sold fraudulent tickets or no tickets at all. They just take your money. So we have to know that method as well. And then part of what we do in the policing world is we want you, if you've been identified to a financial fraud and you may have lost some of your identity, is how do I protect myself against future victimization? So you have to report it to the credit bureaus, Equifax and TransUnion, and they can flag your account. because somebody, if they get enough of your information, they can apply for credit cards in your name or loans in your name. So if you've become a victim and you've given up some of your identification, it's always good to get a hold of Equifax and TransUnion and flag your account. Then if anybody applies for any credit in your name, you get notified about it before any credit's extended. Something else that, and it just shows you the level of where they think is there's something called the recovery scam. So you've fallen victim to this lottery scam. You've cashed a counterfeit check. You've had to pay back the bank the $4,000, and now fast forward 18 months, because the scammers will keep that data. You get a telephone call. Hi, I'm the police down in the United States, and on such and such a date, you wired via Western Union $3,000 to a person down in our area. How did they know that? Because they're the scammer that got the $3,000 Western Union to you. So they know how the financial transaction worked, and now they're going to tell you that they're with law enforcement and that they've caught the bad guys. And we've actually seized a huge sum of money, and you may be eligible for as much as 2/3 of your money back. So all you have to do is register with us, but to register with us though costs $100 financially. So they go after you again. It's called the recovery scam. So they want you to register to get back part of your money, but it costs you $100 or $200 to register with them. So again, they're coming back to the, back to the well, so to speak, to get more money off you. And again, as we're talking about victims, the big thing there is that embarrassment thing there, but you have to be proactive, because if you've fallen victim, tell your family and friends about it so it doesn't happen again. Even in the world of policing, police members' families have fallen victims to fraud. I know that for sure. And I've talked to a guy who was actually 20 years of fraud investigator, and he called me up and he said, Schultz, you're not going to believe this. My mom actually wired $3,000 to a scammer to pay for a lawyer because she thought that my son was involved in a car accident and was being held in custody. And he says, you know what? I just never thought she'd fall victim. I just never thought of it, so I've never talked to her about it. So again, it's by talking to people. That's how we educate ourselves. A few other things to talk about, just about protecting yourself. One of the big things that I see today is free Wi-Fi. People have phones. Let's talk McDonald's, Tim Hortons, you get free Wi-Fi. If you're getting free Wi-Fi, it's not protected Wi-Fi. It's not protected like your home internet service is, because it should all be protected. Is it okay to log on and read the news while you're sitting in Tim Hortons parking lot? Because we can't go in now due to the pandemic. But if you got yourself a coffee and you're reading the news on your phone, that's fine. But you should never be doing any banking on a free Wi-Fi. You probably shouldn't even check your own email, because potentially, if it's not protected Wi-Fi, you've just opened your phone. If you're opening email, if you're opening bank accounts, you can potentially lose control of your logon information, and the scammer will clean out the account. And we know this happens. That's something I haven't seen in North Bay, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. And the other thing to keep in mind is one of the big things where we see Wi-Fi is at the international airports. So Toronto Airport, right? People are on there, they're checking their phones. People have lost their list. And here's a scam that actually I spoke to this person. This would be a few years ago. I don't want to age myself, but I have been out of the fraud center for over 5 years now. But this person was in London, England, and they're checking their phone, and it's on free Wi-Fi. So they sent a couple emails. So a scammer was able to collect all the data off their email accounts. So while they're in the air flying from London, England to Toronto, somebody sends out an email to every respondent on their email address saying, I'm in London, England, and most friends would know that their colleagues are traveling. I'm in London, England. I've lost my wallet, my passport. Could you please e-transfer me $2,000 to get me through? So now, and they'll open up a free, because it's easy to open up a free email account. So they'll take the person's name and a new Gmail account or any one of these free email accounts. It's very easy. You can set it up in minutes. So now the person landed in Toronto. They're out. They got their luggage. They checked their phone, and they're getting all these email address messages from friends saying, "Hey, I got your email. Are you okay? Did you make it out? Do you still need the money?" That's just an example of how quick and easy it can happen. Fortunately for this person, they were able to email all their contact lists. They had to change their email address. They did some good prevention there, but fortunately none of their friends wired money. But we do know that that has happened, and people have wired money off to this email account, and you know, they're out 2,000 or whatever the scammer's asking for, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. So that's something else to keep in mind is with the free Wi-Fi. Always be aware of pop-up windows. Pop-up windows are bad. Just click the X, get rid of them. Keep in mind when you're on your computer, you're in control. Don't feel pressured to have to react to something. What is your password? I can tell you that there are studies that have been done, and the most common passwords are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Password 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. ABC 1, 2, 3. Password 1. We really have to look at passwords, right? You have to be very, very careful. Scammers like to look at passwords. They're gonna, when they do research online, and they do, they have people within. Like way back, I said that it's a criminal organization. They have people. All they get paid to do is go on the internet and research. They're looking for email addresses. They're looking for phone numbers. They're looking for people's names, any point of contact, because they need that point of contact to start their scams. So you have to be careful about your passwords, whether it be banking or whether it be you know, your email accounts, because if they can get some of your email accounts, they can cause problems for you. I'm just changing something else that second here. Something else I want to talk about just briefly, and I know that this is kind of getting away from fraud a little bit, but we've seen this here in North Bay as something called porch pirates. I don't know if anybody knows what a porch pirate is. It's big in the cities, but it's been here, and we've actually caught people here. I'd like to think it was really good policing, but it was probably luck. But porch pirates are people that follow around delivery packages, people that deliver packages, whether it be Purelator or some other legitimate company. The guy stops, he runs up, puts the package on your porch, gets back in and takes off. These people follow them around, they run out, they grab the package, and then they take off. We actually had it here in North Bay. There were two guys out talking, and they know their neighbors. So the delivery truck came by, stopped, they went up, they put the package on the porch. A couple minutes later, they see a car pull up, and they're still standing there talking. They're like, "Hey, who's that?" They've never seen him at the house before. So they watch the guy go up, grab the package, come back, and they're like, "He doesn't live there." So they called 911 and said, "I think we just saw a theft. And here's the license plate number," because they're watching the car drive away. The car pulls up to the stop sign, turns right, and Johnny on the spot, one of our cruisers happened to be just on patrol. Nice. and happened right on the person. And literally within 2 minutes of the call coming in, we're able to make an arrest. Good police work, well, maybe a little bit of luck too, right? We just happen to be in the right place at the right time. But that's the value of having good neighbors as well, and calling in suspicious things. So porch pirates are a real thing. How do you get around that? Maybe if you're working away from home or you anticipate being away, tell the company don't have it delivered at this time frame, or if you know somebody who's at home all the time, have your package delivered to them or have it delivered to an office. That way it just eliminates the chance of somebody being able to pick up your package. The other thing, and I'm just going to touch on this briefly, is it's been in the media lately, is about theft from cars in and around North Bay and Callender. Make sure we lock it or lose it. If you've got a vehicle, my dad always used to say this, it doesn't cost you anything to lock it. So remove the valuables and then lock up your cars. Please don't leave your wallets in the car, because just like to twist it back to fraud, if you leave your wallet in a car and your wallet gets stolen, yeah, it's a theft, but now everybody has tap credit cards. Those credit cards get used at 3 and 4 and 5 variety stores where the bad guy that's picking up cigarettes or whatever else, and they're tapping your credit card. Well, now that means that the officer has 3, 4, or 5 fraud investigations on top of the theft. Can we find them? Generally speaking, these stores have video. We're eventually going to track the guy down, but it does mean a lot of work, and it also means a lot of work for you, because if you've lost your wallet, now you have to call government agencies to get your driver's license changed. You have to call the bank and cancel your credit cards. Now you have to wait for new cards to come in. So there's that as well. And I think that probably about covers. I think it'd be a good time for any questions if anybody has one.
So if anybody has questions, you can always raise your hand in your screen and I can unmute you or ask you to unmute, or else you can type into the chat. Maybe while we're waiting to see if anybody has questions, a couple things I jotted down that I thought would be great to review at the very end were some of the safety, the quotes, the things that if you keep in the front of your mind when you're going about your day might help you, were that take 5 and tell 2. So take 5 minutes if you're being asked for money or information about your banking, and tell 2 people. Maybe a good way to verify, am I being scammed, or does this seem like something that should be reported? So that take 5, take 2, or tell 2 I liked. Lock it or lose it, you just mentioned. Very, very good advice around your vehicle and your valuables. And only ever use one credit card for online banking. This allows you to have more of a narrow focus if you do have your credit card compromised, and you would still have your other credit cards if you have them waiting in the wings for any emergencies you might have or need. And then you mentioned that the CAFC website is probably the best source to check on current scams. That's the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, and that they would be a great resource if you're a suspect and you don't have somebody to tell or check in with. You can always check there. And to report anything. Did I cover most of what you covered? What you're?
It does, and I will say that one more thing. So we had this made up last year, is we actually have a booklet on scams. Now, the only problem is it's very difficult to get it out in the pandemic. But this is a 10-page magazine on mass marketing fraud that we put together, sharing experiences from both here and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. Comes complete with a list at the back that has the phone number for Equifax, TransUnion, Service Canada, Service Ontario, and Victim Services of Nipissing, because sometimes we all need somebody to talk to.
Right.
Especially if we've lost money, or if you're involved in a romance scam where you've you're just finding it very difficult. There's also a senior safety line that's available 24/7, confidential, free resource. I'm sure you guys have put that out before, but hoping to be able to get these out. I don't know whether we can reach out to you guys to get some of these out, but you will see them around, and we've got a couple thousand of them, and they're not doing any good sitting here. We want to get them out. We want people to be able to have something that they can leaf through and remind themselves.
Yeah, maybe people could request a contactless porch drop or something like that.
Yeah. That hopefully as things open up, maybe we can do something like that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Well, it sounds good. Thank you very much for sharing today. It was informative, and I think another one of the great takeaways is that there's there's a listening ear, and the North Bay Police, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre are all very welcoming to being contacted, being informed, having reports so that so you guys can do your jobs and really battle this ongoing problem, almost as bad as the pandemic we're dealing with.
Yeah, this is one that's been going on forever, and it'll continue to go, right? Because they make some big money off it, unfortunately.
Just a question about the book. Is there a digital copy available of that?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
We're hoping to be able to put it up on our website. We just had a couple logistics problems with it.
So John, if we email you, we could possibly have books delivered to the agency?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
I can give you hundreds. So.
It's fantastic.
Okay. Super.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, super. Thanks so much for having me. Take care, everybody, and stay healthy.
You're welcome. Bye. Thanks again.